Good morning dear students. I am Atikur Rahman. I teach at the Department of Geography, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today we are going to talk about environmental application of remote sensing. In earlier module, I have talked about the remote sensing. You must have learned also about the physics of remote sensing. You must have also learned about the fundamental concept of remote sensing, aerial photography, GIS and GPS. But today what we are going to talk about is the application of remote sensing, where especially the environmental areas, the areas where we talk about the environment. So, if we define the word environment, which is nothing but is the surrounding in which organisms live. In other words, environment is sum total of all elements, that is biotic and abiotic elements which are surrounding us. It comprises of interacting system of physical, biological, cultural elements which are interlinked both individually and collectively. It influences the growth and development of living organisms. With ever increasing human population, nature has overexploited to meet the basic amenities like food, fuel and fiber. Senseless exploitation of nature has not only depleted the finite resources, but also degraded their quality. Therefore, environmental consideration has become a major concern for the world. The focus now is preserving the overall balance and the value of nature and the capital stock. Accurate base-like information and method to evaluate the quality and quantity of resources is a basic requirement for further planning. In this context, remote sensing has been recognized as a vital tool to assess, estimate and accurately map and monitor the resources, where all these resources are and how much. In that context, what we have, the satellite use the data from various satellite data, that is high resolution optical satellite data for urban areas, rivers, floodplain, mountainous areas. Again, the data of low to medium resolution optical satellite data for regional and national level studies, entire river basin and forest. And also the satellite data, another kind of satellite data, that is radar satellite data for emergency operations, observation at night and day both, when the weather is poor or good. So, what we see that, as I said before, that in the environmental application we not only use the remote sensing data, but also we use the GIS and GPS. So, satellite data, we uses different kind of satellite data. You must have also gone through the different satellite data. One is called optical satellite data, another is called infrared satellite data, which also comes under optical. Then we have another data, that is thermal satellite data. Then we have the microwave satellite data, we have LIDAR data and radar data. In broad categories, we can classify these two into passive remote sensing and active remote sensing. Apart from that, we also have a data for environmental application that we call is a data from aerial photography, and that we call is a photogrammetry. So, there are different types of satellite data and different types of aerial photograph, that is low altitude satellite data optical, middle altitude satellite data and high altitude satellite data. Now, the issue when it comes to active remote sensing data, which is also very important, if you want to map any part of surface of the earth, what we need to have a satellite data, you can use optical satellite data or active remote sensing data, radar and LIDAR data. But for the data what we talk about, especially for some emergency and some other cases like flood mapping. For flood mapping, what we need to have? We need to have an active remote sensing data, that is radar data. There is another satellite data which uses its own source of light, illuminates its ground terrain and then it takes a picture of particular part of the surface of the earth, so that we can see, assess how much area has been flooded, how much area has been inundated, how much villages has been inundated, how much forest area has been lost, how much biodiversity and other trees, species and crop area has been destroyed by the flood. So, what I was talking about is that remote sensing, it was not the time when we were having only optical satellite data, but what we are having active remote sensing satellite data, which is widely used for flood, as I said before, for forest fire, for species which is going to be destroyed, forest species, dignal forest and other flood type. So, all these issues are there which can be used easily for the environmental application. So, if we see the application, there is a wide variety of application when we talk about environmental application of remote sensing. If we see the table 1, that clearly shows the application related to natural resource management, where there are 3 columns. In column 1, it is shown that agriculture and forestry and land use cover mapping. For that, we can do crop in identification and acreage estimation, crop condition assessment, yield estimation, soil moisture, etc. We can also do drought monitoring, land use land cover mapping, forest fire detection, and for that the spectral range which is needed, which is used, you must have studied this when we were talking about the basic fundamental of remote sensing in earlier module by some other faculty members, where we use visible region, near infrared region, mid infrared region and thermal infrared region. We also use the thermal infrared region where we have the range of 3 to 4 micrometer. For the water resource studies, we can do mapping surface water bodies, water quality mapping, snow mapping, because snow and ice cover is melting at a very fast rate in today's age of global climate change, aerial extent depth of water, flood mapping. For that we use visible, again the visible region, near infrared region, we also use shortwave infrared region, microwave region, etc. There is another application, environmental application, that is a marine resource and coastal studies. For that we are using, the application could be phytoplankton estimation, fluorescence studies, chlorophyll estimation, sea surface temperature, wetland mapping, etc. And for that we use narrow spectral band of visible and near infrared. We also use thermal infrared, microwave and so and so. And if we see the 4th and 5th application, that is geological and mineral resources, that for that what we have structural geologies and rock type identification. For that we use visible, near infrared again and microwave narrow spectral bands, visible and thermal infrared. This you can see in the different books. Now, if we take the list, what we see, that is a broad wide range where we talk about application of remote sensing satellite data. Again from the table 1 only, what we see, the biodiversity wetland estimation, we also use monitoring forest resource estimation, carbon stock and sink, how much carbon stock do we have, how much marines are there in the water resources in any ocean or any areas. You can also go about desertification and the desertification or desert light condition assessment, how much area has been put under drought, how much area has been put under severe drought, how much area has been put under the medium drought and so. And also today another very new important areas environmental application that is coming up, where we are using satellite data, is the environmental impact assessment. Now let us take one by one and we talk about biodiversity and wetlands assessment. For that we take the optical satellite data, and if you see figure 2, there are 2 photographs, one is of 1949 and second is 1982. What all we see, that white patches, which shows that these areas has been destroyed, that has been cut down. As I said before, that with increasing population, the resources, forest resources are being used, exploited, even or exploited. So all these white patches clearly shows that these areas has been destroyed and where the forest cutting and clearing is going on. So if we can map clearly these white patches, we can get to know how much area has been cleared in 2 different time period, and therefore we can get to know how much area was under forest cover in 1942 or 1980 or 1990, and how much area under forest cover is now today if we take another photograph or image of present time, maybe 2016 or 17. So we can do that. Then second is the habitat suitability mapping. What we have, habitat suitability for mapping, what we do is we not only use the satellite data, optical satellite data in visible and near infrared and infrared region, but also we use this global positioning system. In the global position system, what we do is we try to take the position of specific habitat. Maybe it could be animal, it could be tiger, it could be deer, it could be anything. So, for that we try to use GPS and satellite data in conjunction with these together in totality, and these by using these two techniques we put it in GIS platform and we try to make habitat suitability mapping, and that you can clearly see in the figure 4. What we have is that the blue patches shows the water bodies and the green patches shows the moderately suitable and red patches shows the highly suitable. That means that these are the areas which are very suitable for habitat. That means if you talk about elephant, you talk about deer, you talk about the bear, or you talk about tiger, they try to live in a particular environment that is conducive, that is suitable for them, and for that we need to generate a different data layer in terms of forestry type, land use, soil, slope, humidity, rainfall. All these different data layer we can generate in a GIS platform, and by using these different data layers what we can do is we can run the model in GIS domain and we get the suitability map as I have shown you in the figure 4. Now, there is another application of satellite data, wetland mapping and monitoring. For that we uses optical data. We can use the satellite data from IRS satellite series, maybe IRS 1C data, IRS 1D data, which has a resolution of 5.8 meter to 23.5 meter. We can use list 3 data, list 4 data. So, as you know that wetland is very important not only for the human but also for the other living organisms. It provides a very suitable habitat for the other animals, birds, plant species. It also protects us from the flood. It also protects us from sedimentation, siltation. There are many other aspects which are important when we are talking about. It also plays an important role for groundwater recharge and so and so. So, what we have, we use the satellite data for the wetland mapping and monitoring, because in the today's urbanization and increasing population, what we see that the wetlands are decreasing day by day. So, there is an urgent need to conserve, protect, assess and check the wetlands. So, if you see the figure 5, what we have is that we have used Landsat satellite data of Chilka Lake, and in this there are two images. One is of October 31st, 2012 and second is that of 18th October 2013. What we see that is clearly that if you see the pure black color, that shows a very clear cut, that is a fresh water of ocean. But if you see the little bit bluish, that is the sedimentation, and if you see the white patches, that is the clouds, and red and green are nothing but is the vegetation. So, if we can take similarly the IRS data, Indian data, or Landsat data, US data, that can clearly shows that how much wetland are there and how much wetland is being affected during the flooding and all. Now, we can also use the satellite data remote sensing application in the environmental application, that is monitoring and threat of the vegetation. When we see vegetation, that is a natural vegetation, whether it could be forest type, different types of forest trees in the hilly areas, plain areas or any other areas. We can have grasslands, natural grassland in any parts of the world. So, all these forest types and this grasslands are also being cleared up at a very fast pace. So, again as I said, I have showed you that in table 1 that we are using satellite data from visible region, and that is being widely used. And one very important technique and the model that is being used for the identifying the tree types or threat to vegetation is all that we call is a NDVI, that we call is a normalized differential vegetation index. By using satellite data, we use the image processing software, and where what we do is we can run the model, we can use infrared band and red band to analyze the NDVI, and by analyzing NDVI of different time period, that we call is temporal satellite data, what we can do is we can assess the threats and the clearing up of vegetation. Another is the issue of that we call is a predicting biodiversity and biomass. How much biomass do we have in a particular part of surface of the earth, that also we can calculate. What we do is we try to see the richness, plant richness in a particular part of surface of the earth and plant density, and we can calculate each and every tree type, tree species, and we have the index, we have the parameter which shows that this plant is how much biomass we can have from that, how much water content is there in a particular trees and plants, and based on those calculations we can also calculate the biomass of particular area, which is also a very important application when we talk about the environmental application. Then another application in the environmental application satellite data is that of the plant richness or biodiversity richness. As we know that each and every object, each and every feature, whether it is human or natural, reflects or behave differently with the sun's energy. If you have one particular plant or tree, it will have a different reflectance, another will have a different reflectance, another will have a different reflectance. So, what will happen? By knowing the spectral reflectance of different plants, we can identify that this is a particular plant X, this is a particular plant Y, this is a particular plant Z. So, by doing that we can assess, we can estimate the plant richness, plant biodiversity and plant other species type and all. So, this is another very important application, environmental application, because each and every plant and trees plays an important role, major role in terms of environment, which protects us or which plays a positive role to human or animal life. There is another application of satellite remote sensing, that is called monitoring of forest resources, forest cover. How much forest reserves are there, how much forest types are there, what is the where all the protected forests are there, where all the reserve forests are there. We get to know different forest type, and from the ground survey what we can do is we can see that this is a protected forest, this is a reserve forest, this is a disturbed forest, and so and so. Because these are very important, because we all know from the very beginning, from the school time, that we need to have certain area under the forest cover in order to maintain the proper ecological balance. And for that what we have, we need to see where all these forest cover are. If we see the figure 6, what we see that by making the different forest cover type, what we have, we can see the evergreen forest, we can see the grassland, we can see the water bodies, we can see the shrubs land, we can see the agriculture land. So, all these, if we simply make land use land cover map, we can have what are different forest type, what are grassland, where are the built up areas, where the. So, from figure 6, by simply doing the forest cover mapping, we can also estimate what extent of forest cover are there. Maybe it is 10% forest cover, 10 to 20%, 20 to 30%, 60% or even 70%, even more than 70%. So, that shows key forest cover area, the density of forest cover. We all know that if we have a more green cover area, that will have a better and healthy environment for human and animal all, because it also provides the good suitability for the animal life. There is another very important application of satellite remote sensing in the environment, is that of the forest fire. What we are seeing today, that every day there is a forest fire. We used to listen in the news and we read in the different articles and journals that the forest fire is taking place. Not only in India, but in most of the developed nations like California, Florida and many European cities. What is happening? As I said before, that with the increasing population, people are encroaching in the forested areas, in natural habitat, which is not the habitat of the human, but it is a habitat of the other animals. But we are encroaching, or we are making the houses in the forested areas, and with the increasing human activities, we are interacting with the natural environment, and by one way or the other somehow that leads to forest fire. So, what is happening, that forest fire can be also mapped as being mapped by using satellite data, and for that we have another satellite data, MODIS satellite data, which is a medium to high resolution satellite data which has a special resolution of 250 meter to 500 meter to 1000 kilometer. That satellite data is being used to map and monitor the forest fire. If you see the figure 7, which clearly shows that forest fire assessment. If you see the left side, that is the plumes of forest fire and the clouds which are there in the left side. But if you see the right side, top right corner images, what we have, there is a bright patches that clearly shows that these are the areas where the intense and dense forest fire is taking place. And if you see the below one, that is afterwards. Now friends, another application what we can see is that of the carbon stock and sink. We know that in the age of climate change, the major culprit is the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, which is one of the major greenhouse gases. So we know that the forests and trees plays an important role in carbon stock storage and other issues. So in that process, what we are doing, we can assess the carbon stock, sink and all by using and by assessing the forest and trees in different parts of the world. That is another very important application. Now another application what we see is that the application in marine resources, the coastal ecosystem management. In the coastal ecosystem management, the important issue is that of the oil spill. We are seeing frequent oil spill in today's world, because with the increasing development and the use of fossil fuel, the fossil fuels are being supplied and from one part of the surface of the earth to another through pipelines, and all these pipelines are moving in the deep ocean. And what is happening, and also not only this, through the oil tankers by the big ships. So many times what we see is that the ships are being collided and some leakages are there, and with that there are million metric tons of oil is being spilled over the ocean and all. So if you see the figure 8, that clearly shows figure 8, there is one big ship which is carrying the fossil fuel from one part of the surface of the earth to another country maybe, and there is a spill. And if you see the surface of the ocean floor, that clearly shows different color, and that color, red color, another color which is grey and red color, that shows the oil has a spill. And with the oil spill, what is happening, that destroy a huge enormous amount of marine life, fish and all, and that is big concern. That is creating a big problem in the ecosystem, coastal ecosystem of the world. Another important application of satellite data is monitoring of desertification, I said before. If you see the figure 9, in that what we have the ASTRA data, NASA satellite data, we have the MODIS satellite data. This is raw satellite data which shows the desertification areas, desert areas. What we see, the dry patches in the left side and the bottom of the image, what we see that these are the areas which are desert. Now if we take another satellite image of some other time, what we can find that these area may have changed, and that how can you get to know that these areas increase or decrease? By seeing the tonal variation, because once we have the desert areas changing from one time to another, we see clearly the change in the tone, that what we see in the light tone in the left side of the bottom and left side of the image in figure 9. Another application, very important application, is that of the air pollution. Today it's not only the land use, land cover, forest and other wetland mapping and monitoring. Today we are using a satellite data, that is the MODIS satellite data from the MOPIT sensor that map and assess the concentration of carbon dioxide in atmosphere, that assess the ozone in atmosphere, that assess the concentration of carbon in atmosphere, and all these are very important issues that one need to assess and map. Not only this, we also use the aerosols, that is also coming up at a very fast rate, the problem of aerosols that is coming up, and for that we are also using satellite data, MODIS satellite data. If we see the figure 10, which is of 1973 satellite data of NASA Skylab, that shows a cross symbol, and around the cross symbol you see one circle that shows there is smog. which are thick smog that is there. So all these kind of studies we can apply the satellite data. Now if you see in the Indian scenario, what we are seeing since the last couple of years, that in Delhi we are experiencing a very thick smog, very thick and dense smog in the winter especially, and that is mainly because of the burning of the crop residue in the Punjab and Haryana. That is also a very important issue. So all these kind of mapping and monitoring the pollutant which are there in atmosphere can be done easily or being done. So that is another very important application of satellite data in when we are talking of environmental application. Now another issue is that of the soil and water drought monitoring that I have showed you before that also. For that what we are using the different satellite data, either list 3 sensor, list 4 sensor and all. Now the last part of this module is the environmental impact assessment. As I said that environmental impact assessment, for the environmental impact assessment, what we are doing, we are creating different data layer, different sets of data layer by using different satellite data, and as per our need and requirement, what we do is we are generating different data layer, and there are n number of models. As I said that one is the NDVI, another is that of land use land cover, another is that of the slope, another is that of the water bodies mapping, surface water body mapping, wetland mapping. All these data layers are put together on a GIS platform, and then what we are doing how much impact is going to have of a particular economic activity, particularly in industrial activity. So these are some of the important applications that I wanted to put before you. To sum up today's talk, what I can say to you, dear friend, that we have enormous and huge potentiality of application of satellite data of different sphere of environment, whether land environment, or water environment, or aquatic environment, or lithospheric environment, or atmospheric environment. In all these three environment, we have enormous potentiality and use of satellite data, and that can be effectively and efficiently being used for monitoring and mapping the environment of any particular part of surface of the earth. That can be seen in different case studies. So I wish you good luck. Thank you very much.